After the fall of the Assad regime, many Syrians forced from their homes by years of civil war are looking toward the future. The UN estimates that as many as 1 million internally displaced people have now returned to their hometowns in the hope of restarting again. Millions more remain in temporary housing after their houses and villages were destroyed. DW's Mohamad Chreyteh reports now from Idlib in northern Syria, where refugees looking to return home still face an uncertain future.
Zardana, in the Idlib countryside. It's an area filled with slums and displacement camps for families from northern Syria. Mohammed left his hometown of Ma'arshurin in northwestern Syria over 6 years ago, fleeing attacks by Assad regime forces.
I want to end my displacement and my status as a refugee and return to my land and live and rebuild my life there, but how can I do so? There are no hospitals, no schools, no clinics, no mosques. Everything's destroyed, so why should we return?
Like hundreds of refugees in this camp who left in search of safety, they live in plastic tents that fail to protect them from the winter frost or the summer heat. They long to return, but where to?
This is our neighborhood. Where can people return amidst the devastation and destruction? This place is inhabited only by hyenas and beasts. This sums up my entire life. I worked for 20 years to build this house. This is my home. How can I return to it when it's destroyed?
Mohammed's hometown of Ma'arshurin is one of the many cities reduced to rubble during the civil war in Syria. It is only 50 kilometers away from his camp, but far from being a place to live.
Where will I get water for my children to drink? Even a water tanker can't get through the destroyed roads. It's all destroyed. This isn't just my situation, it's the situation of the entire village. The schools are destroyed, as are the clinics. Everything's completely destroyed. It's not just the result of bombing. It's all looting by Assad's thugs. The former regime did this to our homes. They took the iron bars and destroyed everything.
Despite the destruction, Mohammed clings to the hope of returning to his village one day. For now, with a heavy heart, he's staying in Zardana.
Today, after Syria's liberation, we don't know what our future holds, but it appears to be unknown for now. We hope it won't be. We, who gave so much and were displaced, hope and ask the entire world not to forget us.
All right, we can now talk to our correspondent, Mohamad Chreyteh, who filed that report. Mohamad, you've shown us one example. If we zoom out, what's the situation like around the country? Are there areas more affected than others?
Well, if we look at the latest numbers by the UNHCR, that suggests that more than 7 million remain internally displaced in their own country, and that's almost 70% of the population, and 90% of those are in need for humanitarian assistance as they live below the poverty line. These numbers are very reflective, and so is my observation from Syria. So we drive for hours across the country in all directions, and all we can see is empty villages, uninhabitable towns and cities destroyed by 13 years of civil war. So there's immense need for assistance, immense need for reconstruction, so people could go back to their towns. I would say that the areas in the north and northwest are a bit more affected, but that's because they were under control of the opposition militants for a longer period of time, and they were under bombardment by Assad forces until the fall of the regime in December last year.
Mohamad, why are so many people still internally displaced at this point?
Well, there's many factors. As our contributor, Mohammed, our protagonist, said in the story, there's lack of housing, lack of infrastructure in towns, and lack of basic services and needs like hospitals, schools, water, electricity, and so on. But also landmines is a big issue that the government is still unable to address, with very little resources to deal with this problem. We've reported about that, and we've seen many cases of people who tried to go back to their towns and were victims, basically seriously injured and maybe killed also by landmines. But there's also a huge factor that is security and stability. The government forces are not yet in fully control of a vast land in Syria. We've seen during the last few days attacks by ISIS in the countryside in Deir Zur, also attacks by militias and militants affiliated with the former regime, but also attacks and atrocities in the coast by uncontrolled groups that are affiliated with the government. All these elements of instability are making people reluctant to go back to their hometowns.
So that's part of the problem that you paint there for us. What can be done to solve the situation? Is the government in a position to implement a strategy across the country yet?
Well, the government, of course, does not have the cash to rebuild Syria, does not have resources to pump cash into the economy and restore the economy. So the government is very much focused on addressing the international community to lift sanctions imposed on Syria, and that is basically blocking any sort of aid influx and investments in Syria. That's mainly the government goals, at least that's what we've seen from the Syrian foreign minister so far. That's the only plan. The foreign countries, foreign powers seem to be a bit reluctant in lifting these sanctions, because they said that this is not going to happen unconditionally. They want reforms, they want democratic elections, they want inclusion from the Syrian authorities. And these issues have not been fully addressed by the government so far. The rhetoric we're hearing from the government is prosperous, but things on the ground seem to be very hard to implement.
Mohamad Chreyteh, thanks so much.